This is the latest version of the Lexus NX, and although from a distance it looks quite a lot like the old car, it is in fact brand new. In fact, 95% of the components here are brand new as well, and the cabin has been completely changed. Now, has Lexus done enough to tempt you away from a BMW X3 or an Audi Q5? Well, today I'm going to try and find out. But before we go any further, if you like what we do, why not give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more awesome videos just like this one. So yes, if you're familiar with the Lexus NX, this new version is going to look very similar, but when you actually compare this version to the older model side by side, some of the differences really start to stand out. For instance, the front and rear of the car is 35mm wider than it was before. It also sits 20mm lower to the ground, and the wheelbase has been stretched a little bit to open up more space on the inside. Now, the model we have here is the top spec Takumi model, which actually looks like most of the lineup. However, there is also an F Sport model as well, which Lexus not only thinks is going to be the best seller in the UK, but also comes with some visual changes. You get a sporty body kit with an even more angular front end, and you also get a more aggressive rear end as well. That aside, you actually get a slightly sleeker look down the side of the car. The panels just seem to be a little bit smoother and you don't have as many harsh lines, apart from this one right here, which feeds right in to the rear tail lights. And that's where one of the big new features is, and it's a rear light bar, because nothing says that you're a very important person like a LED strip that runs along the width of your car. And matched up to that is a new set of LED headlights. And finally, if you look at the grille, yes, it's a very similar design to before, but it's actually a little bit more pronounced at the top to give you a slightly flatter appearance. The NX comes with two different hybrid systems. One is badged the 350h that we have here, and then there's the 450h Plus. Now, both use the same 2.5 litre petrol engine, producing 241 horsepower in the 350 and 309 in the 450h Plus. The main difference comes in the hybrid systems. Now, the 350h is what's called a self-charging hybrid, or a more traditional hybrid. So basically, when you're driving around, it'll charge the car up for you to give you small bursts of electric power, and will also chime in with the petrol engine as well to make your car a little bit more nippy. The 450h Plus, though, is a full plug-in hybrid, and that means that you can plug it into a charger and drive for up to 45 miles on battery energy alone. And if you go for the F Sport, you don't get any power upgrades, but you do actually get some chassis tweaks, including adaptive dampers. All versions of the NX come with a power-assisted tailgate, and when you open it up, you'll find 545 litres of storage, which actually compares really well with other hybrid rivals, such as the BMW X3 hybrid, which has 100 litres less storage. Now, what's also really handy about the NX is not only do we have a nice flat boot floor, so loading stuff is really easy, but there's loads of storage underneath the boot floor as well. So you'll never run out of space to put stuff away. The only thing I would like, though, is there's no automatic releases for the rear seats. If you want to lower the rear seats, you've got to go and do it manually. I want to talk about door handles for two reasons. One, on the outside, you have electric door handles. So when I want to go inside, I just press a little button on the inside here and the door opens, which feels very fancy. And the second point is to do with the handle on the inside. Now, Lexus has introduced something called e-latch, which basically means that if the car notices that there's a pedestrian or cyclist coming up your inside and you go to open the door, it'll sound a warning and actually prevent you from opening the door, which is really handy, and it believes that it could save up to 95% of incidents that usually happen with people opening the door and not paying attention. Anyway, onto the interior. Now, this is completely different to the old NX, and it all starts off with a new center console. We've got a brand new drive selector along with a small dial for changing between the different driving modes. We've got a wireless charging mat, and below that is a little bit more storage, and the center console is all topped off with this leather wrap. Now we've got the burgundy leather in here, so it really sticks out, but on the driver's side you've got this kind of leather wing that kind of goes around the top of the center console and wraps around the driver's side, but on the passenger side it's black leather, and that's all to do with making the car more driver focused. There's a brand new steering wheel design which feels lovely to hold, although I do find the button layout to be a little bit baffling. And just in general, it feels like a very luxurious place to be and a lot less cluttered than the old car, even though you still have physical buttons on the inside. That being said, there is now a new gigantic touchscreen infotainment system. Now it starts off with a 9.8 inch panel, but this is the top spec 14-inch panel, and it is huge. In fact, the system actually reminds me a lot of the Mustang Mach-E, and you can watch my review of that by clicking the link in the top right-hand corner, because the layout of the system is very similar and it's got this kind of very clean and simple aesthetic to it, but you actually get these dials which actually look like they're hovering on top of the touchscreen for the climate settings. The system is really very responsive and feels much snappier than most systems that are available on the market, although I have found it a little bit challenging to navigate. Again, it's the kind of thing that when you own your NX for a while, you'll probably just get used to within a week or so. And if you don't get used to it, there's always Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, which come as standard. Now, the touchscreen is all included in this kind of wraparound panel that integrates really neatly into the virtual cockpit. Now, with the virtual cockpit, instead of having one massive screen, you have some digital elements on the outside, and then you've got a dedicated smaller screen in the center of the panel. It's a clean looking design and gives you all the information that you need, but it doesn't feel quite as techy or as vibrant as something like the Mercedes GLC. But to end on a high note, the NX supports OTA updates, or over-the-air software updates. So that means that the car's software can all be updated for free over Wi-Fi without you having to go and take it in to a service center. The last thing I wanted to talk about with the cabin design is the kind of wraparound feel that it's got. And Lexus says that's part of its new Tazuna concept, which in Japanese apparently means the reins of a horse, because everything is within reach of the driver, like the reins of a horse. Anyway, let's get on to pricing. Now, it all starts off at about £38,000 for the 350h. And if you want the fully loaded version that we've got here, the Takumi model, then you'll be paying around 53 grand. If you want the 450h plug-in hybrid, then it carries around about a £10,000 premium. The good thing is, though, is that the NX is actually really well equipped. I mean, you're getting touchscreens throughout the entire range and the digital cockpit, although obviously the differences are the screen sizes. But what really separates Lexus apart from the German rivals, at the very least, is that you actually get quite a lot of driver safety kit included as standard, such as adaptive cruise control and also collision warning systems. Now, most of that you usually need to add on the options list if you go for some of the German alternatives. Now, in the back of the NX, and the first thing that stands out to me is just how spacious it is. Now, I'm a little bit under 6 foot, and the driver's seat is actually further back than my traditional position, and that's because when the car's off in the NX, the seat is slightly further back, making it easier for you to get in and out, and when you turn the car on, it then returns back to your position. And yet still, I've got quite a bit of knee room to go. Headroom is a little bit tighter, and that's partly because we've got the panoramic roof, which always cuts into headroom. If it was just a conventional roof, you would have a little bit more. We have an armrest with a couple of cup holders, and also, while you're on the go, there's a couple of USB-C chargers down here as well. So you'll never run out of power if you're on the back and on a long car journey. Now, whenever we go and do first drives like this, we usually have a presentation beforehand with all the important numbers and what's changed over the old car. And as you get with every manufacturer, there's always a little bit of marketing spin. So for the NX, when they were talking about the driving experience, there was something along the lines of it being a car made for drivers and people who enjoy driving, but it's also meant to be comfortable and easy. In my experience, that always just turns out to be just buzzwords to make it sound like it's a car for everybody. But really, this NX actually lives up to it. Like, this is an extremely comfortable and quiet car, and just feels like a really relaxing place to be. Like, road and wind noise are kept to an absolute minimum, so even when you're going 60, 70 miles an hour, it just feels pretty much silent in here. And because we've got the CVT gearbox, after a little bit of noise when you put your foot down like this, it calms down quite a lot. So when you're cruising, you don't get any noise really coming from the engine. And yet I'm the kind of person that really enjoys a car where you can grab it by the scruff of the neck. And while the NX isn't that kind of driving experience at all, it steers really well. It feels like a really rewarding car to drive. You don't often get that with crossovers. There's just something very satisfactory about the way it turns. As for performance, in the 350h that we've got here, it'll go from 0 to 62 in about 7.5 seconds, which isn't that nippy, but you've got to remember that this is a hybrid, and when you're driving it around town or at slower speeds, it's going to feel quicker than the numbers suggest, because that's when the electric motor really kicks in. And we know that electric motors come with near instant torque, and it will just make the car feel a lot snappier again than the numbers suggest. And on the subject of electric power, there is actually an EV mode button down here where if I press it, it'll then switch the car over to battery mode. However, because the battery is considerably smaller in here than it is on a PHEV, you won't get that much EV running. So most of the time, it's just easier to let the car figure it out automatically. Now, aside from EV mode, there are actually other driving modes as well. There's Eco, Normal, and Sport. As for the way it drives, there's a noticeable difference between Eco and Sport in terms of throttle response. So I'm in Eco at the moment, and it definitely feels a little less eager to get up and get going. But other than that, you know, we don't have adaptive dampers in this exact car, so it doesn't like the car gets stiffer or becomes more focused. It's merely just basically the way that the throttle reacts. I want to talk about the driving tech as well, because as I kind of briefly touched on earlier, you get quite a lot of semi-autonomous features thrown in as standard, and they've actually upgraded some of them as well. So adaptive cruise, for instance, has been upgraded on the new NX, and honestly it feels like a really very well engineered system. So when you're on a motorway and you're cruising along, it just takes off a fair chunk of the workload for you. It also has a steering assist as well, so you can stay in your lane, and basically just the only inputs you'll need to do is obviously prevent yourself from crashing and paying attention, but just going from lane to lane and choosing your exit. And I think that's really where Lexus sets itself apart from rivals, is you do get quite a lot of kit as standard. The big differences between the trim levels in the current NX range is more luxuries than the actual technology itself. Yes, there are some tech bits that you can add on here and there, but you're getting a well-equipped car pretty much throughout the entire range. And the Germans do it better in some ways. I think a BMW X3 is more enjoyable to drive. It steers a little bit nicer, and the controls are a bit more driver focused and I would say heavy. And if you go for something like a Mercedes GLC, it's just going to feel a little bit more luxurious on the inside. Showroom luxury, something where when you get in it, you're kind of wowed by how good it looks. And while the interior design doesn't exactly scream lavish or luxury, it does look nice and feels extremely well put together. Couple that with a fully hybrid range, and you've got something that makes quite a tempting company car buy as well, because you should have slightly lower benefit in kind company car tax. So in summary, a huge improvement over the old car, and with a great equipment list and those electrified engines, the NX is a serious rival to the German establishment.